All right, here. I think we're live. Let's find out. All right, here. I think we're live. Let's find out. Everybody can hear that, I presume, right?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. All right, I'm going to turn that down. Welcome, everybody. We're doing a FCP Xmas here today. We're going to talk about Final Cut Pro in 2018 and perhaps 2019, depending on who has any information they'd like to share. So my name is Richard Taylor. I am going to introduce people from my left to my right. Bill Davis from California.
Yeah, so it's FCP Xmas with an emphasis on the mess today.
Yeah, Xmas. No, it's actually Xmas, Christmas. We decided to get together for a little Christmas celebration here on the interwebs. Then we have next in my lineup is Brad Olson from Off the Tracks.
Right. How's everyone
Say
doing?
hi so that people can see you.
Hello.
Brad has a discount on Off the Tracks now, right? Don't you?
That's right. I've done a $10 discount on the bonus feature edition and a $3 discount on the regular version on VHX. So it's FCP Xmas.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. And next on my lineup, we have Jasper. Is it Seegers? Seekers. He's the man responsible for PostLab, for collaboration and with Final Cut Pro editors. Now, he is not a Final Cut Pro editor. He's an IT guy. He developed this for his organization. He's on Final Cut Pro Radio 71. You can hear him talk all about that. And next on my lineup, we have Lee Herbert from Australia. He's the only Australian we have so far.
Hello.
Waiting for the others to wake up.
Exactly. I think Alistair is going to pop in. So Lee was at the summit. We met him there. He presented at the summit.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And then we have Marcelo from Rio de Janeiro. Is that where you are today? It's the internet. It's slow.
Just hold up signs for us, Marcelo. Good night.
There you go. And then we have Mr. Michael Comas from Five Things, the Five Things broadcast podcast.
Hello, everyone. Happy holidays.
Absolutely. So does everybody here use, except for Jasper's 10.4.4 Final Cut 10.4.4?
Yes.
Yeah, I've used it.
Oh, you have used it, but you're not an editor, right?
Yeah, but I have to make PostLab compliant for 10.4.4, so I've opened it.
What do you think about it so far, Jasper?
I absolutely love the workflow extension part. I think that's a major leap forward.
Is that what you're going to head for with your PostLab?
Well, it's been sort of it's not available for developers yet publicly, so you have to be asked by Apple to develop for it.
Okay.
So I think it's very interesting. So I don't know yet what you can do. Everything. Yeah, we're back.
Somebody's speaker got turned on, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, this is always a challenge when we have this many people, but we'll get through there. So I got Santa Claus in the background over here, and some choir boys on this side, and I got look.
Jingle bells.
In case we have any reindeer that stop by. So, Michael, have you worked with Final Cut 10.4.4 much yet?
Yeah, I actually did a lot of benchmarks with the new Blackmagic eGPU Pro and I was able to use that with Final Cut Pro 10.4.4 as well as compressor. I think that was still .2, but yeah, I used that under 10.14 under Mojave, and very smooth, very fast, and when you plug in an eGPU, it just flies.
So Final Cut Pro 10.4 recognizes the eGPU and uses it then?
Yeah, there's, and I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo, so if I pause, I apologize.
Yeah, I think it's on your end, Richard, because I'm watching the levels bounce, and then bounce to the person talking, and on you. So you've got the speaker on.
I don't have a speaker on. Let me turn it down here a little bit. I'll turn my... I don't have a speaker on.
You sure? It's just I watch the levels, and they bounce on yours when they're talking.
I got not only the speaker turned down, but I have the speakers actually physically turned off.
Is
Well,
audio
I'll
hijack
try
or
and-
anything? What are you using as your audio patch?
Oh, I have multiple audio patches.
Ah! Something is feeding into itself.
Let me try this. Let me turn off my system sound. Okay, let me do this. See if that helps.
No, hugely.
It did it?
I still heard an echo on Bill, but
Did you?
Are you
Well, I'll just talk
Anyway,
around it, I
Michael,
guess.
yeah, go ahead.
go for it.
Yeah, one of the great things about Mojave is that there is built-in OS support for external GPUs, eGPUs. In previous incarnations in High Sierra, you had to run code in the background, or sometimes you had to connect a monitor through the eGPU so it was magically recognized. And what Mojave does is says we don't need any of that crap. We're just, all you have to do is go into the app, and via the Finder, you check a box that says prefer external GPU. So that means the app is automatically routed to that GPU when it calls for GPU acceleration. So all you have to do is do that for the app that you're running, and it works great with Final Cut 10. Compressor, not so much. Compressor was still utilizing the onboard GPU, so I'm guessing that'll be a dot upgrade, a fix. Resolve ran fantastic with it. It was obviously, since Blackmagic built it, we're going to get that performance. But yeah, it was exponentially better with an eGPU attached.
So that's
Exponential is
fantastic.
good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping the review I did of it, unfortunately, I was asked to take down for the time being. So I'm hopeful that I can put that back up, and when it goes up, back up, you'll be able to see just how much stuff I was able to load on the timeline inside Final Cut 10 and have it utilize the eGPU.
So come clean. Who'd you tick off?
As I don't want to get anyone in trouble, it's not who you would think. We'll leave it at that. It's not
Okay.
who you would think. But I'm
No
hopeful.
fruit or damage to the process of getting this taken down off the internet.
No,
Is it
what? I'm
just
sorry?
something? Is it something that needed to be fixed, or is it something on your part that you just didn't know? Or I'm curious because I watched that review. I thought it was insightful, and
It's political, I think would be the best way of phrasing it.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, the review was, aside from saying that the eGPU Pro was a little bit top heavy in terms of price, the performance inside Final Cut 10 and inside Resolve was fantastic. It didn't perform at all with Avid. It didn't. It had marginal improvements inside Premiere. But yeah, there really wasn't anything mean-spirited. It was just politics. So I'm hopeful that in the next few weeks I can put it back up and deal with any fallout. But yeah, the performance was just fantastic, and I think as more people start using portable devices like laptops and whatnot, the eGPU really shines in terms of being able to edit remotely and then plug in and then get that huge render boost. So I think it's going to be a good addition to our arsenal.
Michael, what are your benchmarks with the compressor now? It's 64 bits.
That's the one hiccup is that I did this testing end of November, early December. And as you know, since then, there's been a compressor update.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there were some dot fixes before the end of the year. That's just an assumption. It's not, sharing any insider info.
Yeah.
So I don't really have anything to compare it against to answer your question. All I did was see, was it faster with an eGPU? Did it use the eGPU? And as I said, the compressor saw it, but didn't use it.
Well, the weird thing about compressor as well is before they rewrote it to be 64-bit, the application was 32-bit, but if you ran certain codecs, if you were encoding certain codecs, you'd see, if you opened up Activity Monitor, you'd see a little thing called Pro Transcoder Tool that was a 64-bit like helper app that ran in the background. So compressor was still doing some of that performance, but obviously moving in the future, Apple's not going to accept any 32-bit applications natively.
That brings up a really interesting question. I'm curious what the brain trust here says. By the way, hi, Tony.
Howdy, everybody.
There he is, Mr. Gallardo.
I'm sure all of you have heard about the kerfluffle with NVIDIA and Apple, and the Apple not signing the drivers for NVIDIA in Mojave. And then last week, there was a presentation with Jared Land with Red, talking about, hey, we're doing 8K in real time with Red and NVIDIA. And Jared actually at the top of the presentation actually called out Apple in the room respectfully and said, please support NVIDIA on the Apple platform. And I'm curious what everyone here thinks about the decision not to endorse NVIDIA under Mojave.
Alex Gollner said something that is not quite, I didn't quite understand, but he was saying it's on NVIDIA, it's not on Apple. Even though they're saying that, huh?
That sounds like a typical thing between companies, though. It's not our fault; it's their fault.
Well, and I think that's fair in some circumstances, because let's face it, this is intellectual property. These companies invest tremendous amounts of money on creating these things. And if another company is going to use it and gain market share and money for that, it's fair to get those intellectual property things straightened out. And I know, Apple is really serious about that. I mean, the number of patents they file to protect their legacy codecs and their current technology are not insignificant. They have a lot of lawyers on call, I'm sure, to do just that. So, these vertical camps, they're not just going to give each other their priority intellectual property to use at will. So I don't think we're ever going to stop seeing this problem of somebody's codec doesn't work on somebody else's platform for a while until all the parties get that hashed out.
We're specifically talking about NVIDIA though, and their drivers for running on a Mac, which is weird that Mojave.
Right, but they're drivers that need to be updated consistently, because every time system structures change, you need to update drivers. Like we've been seeing that forever, right? Without codecs being updated, without drivers being updated, things break. And so I think Apple has a pretty strong bit of IP protection about, if you're going to do these things and change the streams that are coming through our systems, there's some rules. And until that company follows the rules and comes back and they have a dialogue, they don't just willy-nilly say, hey, go ahead, change all your drivers. We don't care. Just, ship them up to the web and we'll let everybody download them.
If that's the case, that's true. I mean, if the case is we don't know. No. We don't know if it's Apple. We don't know if it's NVIDIA. But the idea is we should have as many options as possible. That would be nice for us.
Well, my gut's telling me that this all comes down to a business decision. And again, this isn't insider info. This is just speculation. As you know, we're finding a lot of AMD cards inside newer Macs. And I would not be surprised at all if AMD said, look, you want to put AMDs in your systems, we'll knock the price down on a per unit cost, but you got to give us some love here. There's got to be not exclusivity, but there has to be some way of you showing that you're selecting us over everyone else. And whether that manifests itself in exclusivity, or maybe it's like they did with the iPhone, where when it first came out, remember, it was only AT&T for a short time, and then it became other companies as well.
And just more recently, ProRes RAW. Atomos co-develops with us. Atomos gets it for a while. Nobody else gets it. And then at a certain period of time, our intellectual property, you expect, goes farther than that.
Well, while there is that, I think something to keep in mind is that one of the things that I really like about Apple is that, yes, they're a business, they focus on making money and all that kind of jazz, but their core system is that they want to concentrate on the customer experience. So I would hope, I don't know, but I would hope that when they, when AMD comes to them and says, hey, we want you to give us a bit of love, Apple might turn around and go, well, look, we're fine with giving you a bit of love, but you got to make sure that that love results in a positive experience for our customers and the best possible experience for our customers.
Absolutely.
Richard, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, you just
Oh, I'm
suddenly
sorry.
dropped away from me too.
Sorry,
There you go.
that's I have my cough button on. So what do you think about compressor? You said it's not working at all with eGPU Pro?
My test showed that while the system saw it, while the OS could be told use the eGPU for compressor, compressor wasn't actively hitting it during transcodes. My transcode was basically ProRes with a blur effect, iPhone H.264 with a color effect, and it just, as you can see in the activity monitor inside on the Mac OS, it just wasn't being hit.
What were you encoding to, Michael?
Two. I encoded both a master file into a ProRes 422HQ. I also did the YouTube preset for H.264 inside compressor. I understand that depending on what codec, it could use GPU or not use GPU, and there's only so many tests I can run. That's why I did the ProRes to ProRes with an effect, and then ProRes with an effect to H.264, hoping I could trigger, any differences that there might have been.
And here's another question: the blur on the ProRes, was that applied in compressor, or was that from a Final Cut timeline?
No, that was from a Final Cut timeline. One of the things I love to do is the file export, or I'm sorry, file send to compressor. Just like in Adobe, you have, open a project inside Adobe Media Encoder. I love the fact of being able to open, send that transcode to a third-party tool so I can keep working in the timeline.
Right.
But I know exactly where you're going, and you're probably saying, "Well, Michael, why did you do the export in Final Cut 10?"
No.
And you're completely right. I didn't do it.
I just know that, like, compressor, say you rendered your timeline in Final Cut, when you send to compressor ignores all those render files.
I didn't render.
Right, and then the other thing is, so I don't know, compressor works differently. So I'd be curious to know if you applied an effect in compressor, it'd probably be the same though. It just doesn't see the GPU at all. And I know that H.264 is using, like, the Intel. If you have an Intel chip, like the i7s, then it uses its little quick sync for faster encoding to H.264. But the rendering should still be handled by the GPU. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No. It's we have a delay here. I actually tested this on the 2018 Mac Mini with an i7, so it was something that already had the quick sync, as you pointed out, on the chip. I personally think that I was just testing a pre-release beta model. As you know, the eGPU Pro was pushed back a month. It was supposed to ship in November. Now it's slated for December. So I'm willing to bet I was just using something too early in the process where compressor wasn't optimized to use it. And I completely, fess up to the fact that I was using something that was beta or maybe even alpha.
But I've seen people report the same thing with eGPUs using, like, a Sonnet enclosure and other stuff too. So it's not unique to the Pro necessarily. It sounds like it's still on the Apple end.
Well, I know everyone here is an Apple fan, so I don't want to call anyone out.
No, that's okay. We have our different critiques of Apple, but it's not a problem as long as they're
Fans, I don't know
professional.
what you're talking about.
To me, it just says that we're in a different era. We're now. You remember when it used to be perfect and ship? That was the era of Glassmasters and CDs and all the rest of that. And we are so far beyond that now. We're so far into the get it darn close, ship it, and then iterate, refine, and perfect over the course of sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. And it's astonishing to me that you get these spikes in the chatter class. Oh my God, this is a huge kerfluffle. Oh my God, this is going to stop everything. And a month later, nobody's talking about it because it's all gone away. And that is the new paradigm for internet complaining in my mind. Oh my God, this is going to stop everything. It's the worst thing in the world. And then a month later, can you even remember what it was like 60 days ago?
Something about legacy codec pops to mind.
Crazy, yes.
Well, now that's a legacy problem.
The technology news cycle. You know?
And how many times have we seen that? How many times, oh my God, you've broken the software.
Well, to be honest, though, the legacy codec article, the original one, was not very clear. It made things confusing. So when Apple redid the article, it was much clearer. So did that somewhat sound Apple?
Yeah, listen, no question their communications could have been absolutely clearer, and they get a ding for that. But the fundamental problem wasn't a gigantic fundamental problem.
No,
but was treated like that.
I agree.
Amongst the chattering class and blew up and spread like wildfire.
Well, Sam Messman and I talked about it on the latest Final Cut Pro Radio. From what I understand, the problem is people want to play. Maybe Michael can address this because I know you work with Avid. People want to play Avid DNX HD in Final Cut because Avid has come out and said that it will play in Avid itself. Is that right? Is that what it is?
I think there's a lot of nooks and crannies to a discussion like that. When you look at DNX HD and the newer DNX HR, yeah, there's a lot of hardware devices out there that are recording into that, just like folks use, the Ninjas and whatnot to record into ProRes. A lot of folks are using Key Pros to record into DNX, so it's not uncommon. We also have a lot of legacy workflows, and I stress the term legacy, here in Hollywood, where they're still doing offline-online workflows from the late 90s, right? They're still dealing with JFIF, if anyone remembers that, 15:1, 14:1, because they don't want to buy new storage and they don't want to buy new machines, and using older codecs is easier on the machine. So I think there was a lot of concern about the folks who use a workflow, have no reason to change that workflow, and were concerned about their existing workflows, as antiquated as they are, not being functional in the new world order. And I think one of the things that Avid said was, look, as long as you play it inside Media Composer, you'll be fine. But, no one wants to put all their eggs in one basket, and everyone's worried that if only Media Composer plays it, what happens to any other app I use? And I think we are going to find the chinks in the armor, so to speak, in a couple years when it isn't supported on macOS any longer, and folks try and take Avid Media out of Avid and try to use it elsewhere. And then we'll see how different transcoders work, how different NLEs work, and is that translation actually working?
I think that's an utterly fair analysis.
Absolutely.
I mean, Apple always has said, and they've been very public and upfront about this, we are moving forward. We are going to drop legacy stuff. We're going to try to get to where the current state of the art conceivably is, which means you are going to get speed, you're going to get convenience, you're going to get stability, but only if you bring your hardware along for the ride.
So look what I found on the Blackmagic site.
Tony's about 10 years younger than that, man. Was there some airbrushing in there?
Hey, what's going on? That wasn't supposed to be released. How'd that get out in the wild?
I was wondering if that's a special haircut that you have to have for the Blackmagic tutorials.
It's a rigorous process.
You look like Andrew Ballman.
Everyone walks through the door, and Grant's got just clippers there, and he just
I had a fro
runs across everybody.
I had a fro going, and I was hoping that would work, but yeah, as soon as I walked in, it was makeup. Look over there, there's a bird, and then it's gone. So, yeah, what can I say?
So you're pretty embedded with Resolve now, right? Are you editing in Resolve too?
Yes and no. I mean, we're still a Final Cut shop by all means.
Okay.
So I would say we probably do about 80 to 90% in Final Cut, and the other 10 to 15% in Resolve as far as editorial. But I mean, we use Resolve it's a Swiss Army knife, right? So
yes.
From release to color to, a lot of times I'll bring in other projects from Media Composer, Timelines, or Premiere, and use Resolve to translate it for Final Cut or vice versa. So we use it all the time, but now we're starting to use it a little bit more for editorial and obviously for the Fusion side. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I definitely want to use it for editorial. I'm not going to get that involved with coloring or maybe I'll get involved with some Fairlight and stuff, but I'm just curious when it's mature enough or stable enough that I can depend on it for editorial. I'd like to give it a shot on a couple projects.
You should definitely give it a shot.
It's ready now?
If I had to jump back into track-based editing, I would go with Resolve for sure.
Well, you must have tracks.
They must have tracks.
Well,
Yes.
I have tracks in Logic. I use them all the time. I like tracks for audio, so that's not a problem. So
It works really well. It works on my 2015 MacBook Pro. It works on the iMac Pro here. So I don't really have any problems as far as editing or any lag.
I started watching the tutorials, and I liked some of the features that it has. It has a tabbed. You can do a tabbed timeline for your projects, for one thing.
Yes, the tab timelines are great. Pancake editing.
Oh, you can go back to Pancake editing.
We can bring it back to Pancake. Yeah.
Two timelines you can have. I like that. One over top the other.
No, you can have. I was with Scott Simmons at NAB last year, and we did like 6 or 7 timelines stacked.
Is that right?
Yeah, we stacked about 6 or 7 timelines. I don't know why you would want to do that, but yeah.
But just dragging from one to the other is nice. But anyway, let's talk about Final Cut Pro, or we'll get some grief.
Yes. Kick out the Blackmagic guy.
No, we don't want to do that. I absolutely like Fusion. I mean, that looks like very cool. I just have to get involved with it a little bit at a time. I don't only have so much time, so.
Yeah. It takes.
I just thought that when I saw your tutorial and you with just Blackmagic.
Lost you there for a second.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I just. It's internet.
Hello. They're on to us. They know we're talking.
So, Michael, do you work with Resolve that much?
Not a lot, no. For some benchmarking, yeah, but my days of creative editorial and being a creative more than just for 5 things, not doing a hell of a lot. So I can only speak to it from a engineering perspective than a user one.
So you edit in Avid mostly then?
No, which is hysterical because anytime I'm on a panel discussion, it's like you're the Avid guy. I'm like, no, I traditionally edit in Premiere.
Premiere,
actually.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be like making me the Premiere guy. Not a good idea.
Michael, no mandatory haircuts or anything?
What's that?
So there's no mandatory haircuts, like specialized haircuts for working in Premiere?
No, and I just started a new job, and so there's even less of a dress requirement.
I saw you said there's going to be a press release,
Congrats.
but I haven't seen the press release.
It dropped today.
Oh, did it?
Did it?
I haven't
Yeah.
been on the internet.
Tell us.
I'm working for a startup called Bebop Technology, and those of you who are at Editors Retreat a couple years ago, I happened to speak about them. Bebop Technology is editing in the cloud, and let me qualify that. Too often, or since the beginning of filmmaking, we've always been a slave to the technology that we had locally, right? Whether it was old film projectors or whether it was, machines with mag that was sunk together. And then it became, well, how much storage do we have locally? And then it became, how many decks do we have? And then it became, well, I need a huge Mac Pro or I need a huge PC. It's always been limited to what that technology is close to you. Right. And a laptop was a way to kind of get away from that, but you still had to go back and plug in and render everything later or deal with long renders. And what Bebop does is say, we don't need any of that. You've already got AWS, you all got Azure, you've got all of these cloud-based services where we can spin up VMs. So why not spin up a VM that is tailored to your editing environment, and then you pay per hour or per month or per week. So instead of shelling out $10,000 or $15,000 for a machine, you now, for pennies on the dollar, rent a machine that has 120 gigs of RAM and 16 cores and a 16 gig GPU, and you can edit in the cloud using Avid, using Adobe, not using anything on Apple because Apple doesn't allow virtualization, but Cinema 4D and Toon Boom and all the other tools that are used for VFX and video creation, you now can do with a dumb terminal, kind of like what was done in the early 80s, and just edit remotely. And it's a fantastic technology, and it works.
So do you have to upload your media first?
Yeah. And so some folks do it in an offline-online format, meaning they flip their stuff to a lower format or a lower codec, and then upload it and then edit it, and then bring down the product file and relink. Some folks who have massive pipes to the internet or who are doing promos may just upload high res and edit with that. If any of you how many of you have ever used TeamViewer?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Okay, it works, but it sucks, right? Because the color accuracy isn't there, the audio is compressed, it's not guaranteed 30 frames a second. That's because it's using open network protocols, right? Basic HTTP. What Bebop is doing is using something called PC over IP, which is what I like to call remote secure KVM. So it's kind of like what TeamViewer should be in a perfect world. It's basically a window into a editorial server sitting on the cloud.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So you already started with them then?
Yeah, I started back on the 3rd, and this is week 3. Just launched a new website, and I'm really anxious to go out and show everyone that you no longer have to have that bulky system nearby. You can do it remotely using a Chromebook or even using an aging MacBook Pro. As long as you have an internet connection, 20 megabits, you're good to go.
And 5 things, that's your thing. That's your podcast, right?
Yes. Sorry to monopolize the conversation, everyone.
No, I wanted to definitely hear about the new job, and cloud computing has been on my mind for several years now. So I'm interested to see a company actually pushing that forward. I want to get to the point where I have an editing app on like an iPad Pro, and then just take advantage of a cloud computing service like that.
It'll hit your phone first, though. Didn't AT&T just announce 5G rollout across all sorts of new cities? I know we're supposed to get it, I guess, in about 6 months, 5 months here in San Diego. But I looked at the list of the cities that are moving to 5G. So you're going to be able to do everything with your phone tethered to your laptop. That's all you'll need.
It'll be an implant in your brain.
I don't think Apple's going to do 5G for a while.
Well, I mean, you know, if you're concerned about security and stuff like that.
Well, I'm just wondering, with how frequently Apple releases updates, I can't see any reason why they wouldn't go to 5G, especially if it's carrier-based, right? Verizon, AT&T, as long as whatever their iPad version 20 is, you know, I would imagine that every year when they release something, if the chip is cheap enough to put in there, why not?
The rumors I've seen say 2020. The rumors I've seen say that Apple's not going to have 5G in 2019. But
depends on whether they ever settle the damn Qualcomm suit.
That'll be settled one way or the other.
Yeah, the whole industry will move past them.
So you guys, the ones that were at the summit, we got to talk to the Final Cut Pro team directly, secretly. We can't talk about what they talked about, but what do you guys see for 2019? I mean, Apple has pre-announced an update already for the first half of 2019. Very unusual for them to be doing that. They did it. They announced an update because of the legacy media thing. So we're, you know, pretty much guessing 10.5 at NABs. That's a pretty good bet, I would say.
Yeah,
right?
They confirmed the Mac Pro once again. For
you can't talk about what went on in the meeting.
Sorry, but this is already confirmed.
No, that never was not confirmed. They said 2019, so that's when it's going to happen. But no, I'm talking about the article. When they updated the legacy media article, they said there's a new update to Final Cut Pro coming in the first half of 2019 that's going to identify legacy media and give the ability to convert legacy media. So they pre-announced the version of Final Cut, but not that we don't know that, but I'm just thinking, okay, they do 2 presentations a year right now, 2 big ones, NAB and the summit, and both times they have something new to tell us so far for the last couple of years. So they have to have something new to tell us at NAB. I presume they're going to be there again doing their special presentation. I'm just going to presume, since they pre-announced that there's going to be an update in the first half of 2019, that 10.5 is a pretty good bet.
I think it's going to be all AI. If it sees that you have a Cineform file on your desktop, it automatically opens it up, transcrodes it to ProRes 444, shuts it down, and puts your old Cineform file in a hidden folder. That's my prediction.
It'd be nice if they had some AI that could just tell you that you're making bad edits.
There you go.
That's not a good choice,
Don't need
Tony.
AI.
Did you know you had 17 jump cuts in this edit?
Oh, it's
Here
a
is
YouTube video. It's fine. I think we've dropped the ball on something that we should be doing, which was I think suggested by T. Payton, and I kind of asked around about this, but basically the dupe detection thing. Has anybody been following up on this idea of sending everyone printing off the same dupe detection card and then mailing it into Apple headquarters addressed to the Pro Apps team?
Now you realize that Apple watches this broadcast, right?
That's fine. I've talked to certain people who think that's a great idea. So
You've just
I've been
announced that your
told
ballot box
that
stuffing,
as long as you
Brad.
what, as long as you
You've
address
just
it.
announced that you're
Campaigning,
stuffing the
that's all
ballot
it's
box.
Well, it'd be a really funny idea if like Chris Fenwick was saying, he would go take a picture of him at the mailbox every day with the
Brad,
dupe detection card, mailing it off.
No, Brett,
He
it'd
did-
be
he
funny
did a
if we
video
all
there.
sent 2 or 3.
What?
It'd be funny if we all sent 2 or 3.
Right. Everyone has to send multiple dupe detection cards. So I want to bring this back up again because I think this is what the campaign we need to launch.
And
As a
Chris did a
community.
video there, didn't he? He recorded a video, everyone asking
Yep.
for dupe detection. Did he release it online? I didn't see it
I haven't seen it online.
afterwards. Yeah.
It probably has some copyrighted music in it, though. I think he was going to send it directly to some of our friends. So, but I was told if it's addressed to Pro Apps, and when you address it to the headquarters, it will get to the people working on Final Cut.
One of the big things, of course, we keep hearing for a next version of Final Cut Pro, Ryan Velen says, start focusing on some sort of collaboration tool. I think they're probably working on it. I would presume that they're working on that already. They just haven't got the system worked out yet, because we don't want to just see the same thing that we already seen. I mean, Avid is the king of that. Nobody disputes that. Avid is the king of collaboration with multiple editors at this point. I don't know what Premiere, Michael, what has Premiere done with that? I know they have some kind of collaboration. I don't know how well it works.
Adobe has a couple different things. They had Adobe Anywhere, which they used Hollywood as a guinea pig and then shit canned it after 3 years. The project sharing rolled itself into just just Premiere Pro, and that's the bin lock, the green lock, red lock, and that works okay. There are some issues in terms of media duplication and path names and stuff like that. I think the fixes for that are going to be slow coming, as Adobe is focusing on stability now than adding new features every couple of months. Adobe Teams is an offshoot of that, and that allows for folks to work with 2 different copies of media but exchange the same product file back and forth with versioning. So that's pretty interesting. In terms of Final Cut 10, I think the extensions is going to add a world of collaboration possibilities, and I think the fact that Apple really, creates a framework for third parties to come up with these tools, my gut tells me that there's going to be a lot of other third parties who are building the extensibility for shared projects within that ecosystem.
And it's probative to understand that LumaForge just got brought into the App Store. So suddenly there's more interest in a hardware product on Apple sides.
And don't forget PostLab.
PostLab. Well, tell us about
sorry, what?
PostLab quickly, Jasper.
Well, our company, I built the tool for our company. We call PostLab, and we can actually collaborate within Final Cut Pro and do versioning and have sort of bin locking experience for Final Cut Pro already for free. And I was just looking up our data, and we now have around 57 users, about nearly 1,200 projects within it. So we are already doing collaboration within Final Cut 10.
Excellent.
Yeah, and you need a GitHub server. Is that what it is, or
A GitLab server?
GitLab server?
Yeah.
GitLab server. Which
Yeah.
they have a free version, you said.
Yes. Yeah, it's all open source. So the GitLab is the backbone. It basically builds on Git. So Git is versioning system, and it will version your Final Cut libraries. And as soon as you check out a library, it gets locked to the other editors. And as soon as you want to upload your new version, you have to describe what you've changed, so everybody knows what the difference is. Of course, you can go back to each and every version. And every user that opens the project will get the latest version as well. And besides that, we also do some document sharing within that, like voiceover or translations. Documents we put in there as well.
So when I interviewed you for Final Cut Pro Radio, the interesting thing is you're not an editor. You're an IT guy who is trying to solve problems that you were seeing at your company with editors that were using Final Cut Pro.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so as an IT guy, we use Git a lot, and I was thinking the problem that Final Cut Pro editors have already been solved by IT guys for the source code, and they really need the same tool, like versioning and like versioning and issue management and members and or access rights. So GitLab all has that package already, so that's why we've built it on GitLab.
Very good.
Yeah.
So Lee, what did you think about the summit?
I absolutely love the summit. I'll tell you a quick little story that I think was one of the highlights for me. During one of my sessions, there's this bit that I was talking about where I don't so much break the timeline, but I negate the advantages of the magnetic timeline in a very specific example for the project that I was working on. It was a case study that I was telling people about. And this one person in the front row sort of puts their hand up and goes, "Oh, could you just go back and tell me about how you did that with the timeline and why you did that with the timeline?" I was like, "Oh, well, blah, blah, blah." And afterwards, gentleman standing outside, and I started chatting to him, and I see on his badge he works for Apple. I'm like, "Oh, hey, what do you do at Apple?" He goes, "Oh, I look after the timeline." And I thought that is really cool. Like, here I am sort of talking about how I've worked around what they're doing, and that's something that I love about the summit, is that you've got people from Apple who work on the stuff that we are talking about, actually listening to what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a feature come out in the next 12 months that I would love to see addresses that sort of workaround that I had to kludge together.
And Marcelo, what about you? That was your first time at the summit, right?
Yeah, it was the first time. I was really impressed by the number of sessions, the number of parallel sessions. I wasn't expecting so much information and so much interaction during the sessions, because I thought we'd only go there to listen to the keynotes, but every session we went, we had this exchange. People were allowed to ask questions, and the session with the Apple engineers and the Apple marketing people was really impressive. And the tips and tricks, I think my favorite session was the tips and tricks session with
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And people alternating with the tips, and Chris Fenwick going there and interrupting and giving his tips, and it was really a surprise. I was expecting a lot, but not that much. It was really, really great.
And the other thing people don't realize, yes, we had a private session with the ProApps marketing team. I think that's who they are. But they were around anyway, just hanging around. I mean, they were in the lobby, they were at parties. We could just talk to them in there as well. Now, they're not going to spill any secret information. Don't get us wrong. That's not what they're doing. But they're listening to you, and they will have conversations with you the entire weekend.
It depends on how liquored up you get them.
There you go. Well, Brad, you know that firsthand.
I just have to say, I've got to leave here in about 4 minutes, but I missed the summit this year, and I'm really bummed that I had to, but it's a dang response to the fact that 10 has been so successful for me this year. I have had an incredible boost in just productivity because a ton of my work comes in at the end of the year, all my corporate clients getting ready for first of the year stuff. I have had the easiest, most productive 3 months of my entire career this time. And so for anybody from Apple and everybody on the teams and everybody else who's listening to this, just thank you. This was so much easier than years in the past when I was scared that I wasn't going to hit deadlines. And I was, you know, am I going to spend any time with my family instead of just head down on my computer pounding and hoping to get things done on deadline? This was so smooth. It was fabulous.
I presume you're going to be at NAB, right, to make up for not coming to the summit?
I'm going to, you know, unless the same thing happens in April, I don't expect it to. I've always been at I've been at NAB for the past 25 years, and I expected to come to the summit. I had reservations, I had plane flights booked, I had everything done, and at the tail end, my client load just got bigger and bigger, and I couldn't let clients down, so I wasn't able to go, and it really bummed me out because everything you said about how you get access, it's not just that you get access, you have these conversations with people who really speak the same language you do, and are the kind of 10 editors, because 10 editors are a little weird. We're all a little different. You know, we were able to say goodbye to the old way of thinking about things that we have been doing often for decades and change our brains a little bit, at least. And for me, I know it's paid off vastly. So I'm just thankful to be able to engage with this community. It's really cool.
So, Tony, are you going to do work with Blackmagic at NAB this year?
You know, I'm not sure. We'll have to see what unfolds. I have no idea. We haven't even talked about it. But there's, you know, I'm pretty sure something will pop up. But speaking to what you said earlier, I'm really excited about 2019. Just the fact that I feel like Apple is starting to listen to the users for Final Cut specifically. So I'm really keen and excited to see what they start implementing. Hopefully, collaboration, making the tools better. You know, feels like that's what they're going after. So I'm really excited about it.
What do you think about the 2019 Mac Pro? What's that going to look like? Is it going to look like a couple of Mac Minis?
I have no idea. I mean, the Mac Mini is an idea that could be possible. They kind of mentioned stacking Mac Minis at the last announcement. So I'm not sure. I mean, it feels like they're starting to build custom chips as well with the iPad Pro.
Yeah.
So who knows, just, you know, what's going to happen and where they're going to make it modular, where they're not going to make it modular. Are they going to do a display? They talked about making a display.
They did.
Happening.
They absolutely did.
Sure.
You can stack.
But I mean, do we care about an Apple display that much?
Depends on what it is.
I mean, I'm more excited about the Mac Pro itself, and obviously the iMac Pro that has display built in. But on a separate Apple display, I'm not sure if I would get one of those.
It's GPU, man. If I can get more GPU performance, that would be, for me, would be great. So if that means...
Have you worked with the eGPU yet?
I have not, no. I did actually on that demo that I was doing, Blackmagic. That was the only time I've actually worked with the eGPU. But I was on iMac Pro with the eGPU, so I wasn't really doing anything super heavy, so I'm not even sure if it kicked in. But I'm excited about trying it. I want to try one. I don't know if I want to get the Blackmagic one though. I might want to go with like an Aikido Note or something else. I can put.
You want to grow your hair out.
You know, put my own custom card in there.
Yeah, that's what I think I'd like to have as well, as just an enclosure. Bill has to go.
Happy holidays, everybody. I've got to leave you behind.
Bye, Bill.
Have a great rest of the year. Bye-bye.
See you later, Bill.
One of the most interesting tweets I've seen about the Mac Pro was when I don't know who said it, but somebody said, imagine that if the iPad Pro ARM processor is already as powerful as an i7, imagine what you can do with it when you actually put a fan on it and gonna clock it up higher, or because it's even so thin, put in 5 at the same time, or and if the GPU is already pretty good. So I can imagine that the Mac Pro would be the first ARM Mac out there, but I'm really afraid that it's going to be an announcement at NEB and available in December.
Well, that'll give you time to save up for it.
Yeah.
You know, since it's pared down, since it doesn't include in the past didn't even include a keyboard and a mouse, and we've already seen the Mac Mini. We've seen that form factor. We've seen that price point. I mean, the Mac Mini, Michael, how expensive can it get? Like, it can get up into the thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah, the high-end i7 that I was using was $2,000, and once you start adding in the 2 terabyte PCI SSD and 64 gigs of RAM, I think you can get it close to $3K.
Yeah, so
I think it's over 4,000 actually.
Yeah.
Oh, really? It goes before, huh?
Yeah, if you go to 2 terabyte SSD and 64 gigs of RAM, you can get it up there.
There's a tax thing in Australia. I think it's about to expire that you can spend up to $20,000 on a single purchase and claim that back as a tax expense for business. And I'm hoping that Mac Pro at least fits into that.
Just get 2 of them. Yeah, I hope they have a base model Mac Pro that's in the $3,000 or $4,000 range, and then you can go up from there. Especially since they said it's expandable and they said it's modular. Those are the 2 things that they said. So that's going to obviously mean it's going to use Thunderbolt 3 for the eGPUs. That'll be fine. But you still want to get a good graphics card to start with, though, I would think, right?
Yeah, you need something. I mean, would anybody here need a Mac Pro besides like having an iMac Pro?
Technically, we don't need socks, but we want them.
What I want, I got the 2017 iMac, which I have right here. It only has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and I need 3. So I don't care. I'm going to get something with 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. I don't care if it's a Mac Mini. I don't care if it's a new iMac Pro. I don't care if it's a Mac Pro. But I'm going to wait for the Mac Pro before I make the purchase, though.
Dual Ethernet ports. That's something that we desire.
Dual Ethernet.
Did the old Mac Pro had 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Both the cheese grater and the canister.
Yeah.
I love the cheese grater. I love that form factor.
Yeah, you loved carrying it around from place to place.
No, I didn't do that. I put it down like an anchor and just stayed there.
I was going to say, Brad, you have to redo that contract if you're carrying a Mac Pro wherever you go.
There was an event where we set up at a hotel with Mac Pros and we had to carry those things up there. So, but we used a cart. It wasn't too bad.
Cheater.
I'm really, and I almost feel like I should go back and watch that kind of official Apple PR discussion earlier. Was it this year or last year where they
2017
talked about 2017, because when they say modular and expandable, obviously those are 2 different things, and they mean something completely different to Apple than they do anyone else. See, when I think expandable, it's going to have it's like a super micro motherboard, right, where you have 10 PCIe slots and you're going to have a dozen Thunderbolt 3 ports, and we may find out that no, there's going to be 1 PCIe port and a dozen Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports, and that's what they consider expandable and modular. So I'm really curious what Apple's definition of that is compared to everyone else on the Pro side of the industry.
Yeah, if they have more than
think
2 slots, I'd be shocked. If they even have 2 slots,
I would too. Since we can Thunderbolt 3, but the thing is, Apple's already had their shot at the Mac Pro, right? That was 2013. Now they should be listening to the pros. I'm not going to say, they're going to have a cheese grater, but they should have. I would love to have 2 PCIe slots, but I'm not sure.
It also depends.
Thunderbolt 3, I think they're going to work towards.
I'm really wondering if it's going to be something that's going to be back to being rack mounted, Meaning, if it's a Pro, you could put rails on it and put it in a rack, or is it going to be another desktop system? Because we've seen the limitations of trying to make it desktop, right? The fans kick on, it's noisy, there's a lot of heat. Sometimes you don't want stuff on your desk. USB-C is notoriously, and Thunderbolt 3 is notoriously known for not having long cables, right? So now I have to put everything on the desk. So I'm really curious and I don't want to get into a discussion on Pro versus not Pro, but what that means in terms of a Pro machine. Is it something that fits into a rack like a server and you put in 2 PCIe cards and everything else is Thunderbolt 3, or will it be 4 slots? I like I said, I'm just curious what Apple, how they interpret expandable or modular compared to what we say or we think.
Well, they supposedly listened to the pros this time. I mean, that's what the whole idea was. They already had their shot at the Mac Pro, and it wasn't that great. So
hey, I loved my Mac Pro.
You don't have it anymore, Brad. You sold it.
I traded it in.
Your poor little Mac Pro is out there somewhere in an orphanage, a Mac orphanage.
I edited like 7 movies on that thing. It was a fun. I have a picture here.
Let's be honest, though, and I don't mean to.
There's my picture. That's me feeling regret for trading it.
Up there. There you go.
Let's be honest about this, though. If it isn't like Apple is a startup, right? So when they designed the canister and it released in late 2013, are you telling me they didn't talk to any pros? They didn't talk to. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that there wasn't some research or discussion with people who the prospective audience may be. So
I think they misinterpreted. They said that in the interview that they were going down the wrong direction. They thought that GPUs were going to be kind of like CPUs, where they were going to get smaller and you would use more of them together.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening is single GPUs got bigger and more powerful, and they couldn't fit it into that machine. So they just made the wrong projection.
Okay.
And the other thing is we don't need Jonathan Ives designing the Mac Pro. Okay, he can stick with the iPhones because that's where part of the problem came in. I mean, the design, the physical beauty of it. So Jonathan Ives, keep him busy doing something else. Give us horsepower. Okay, that's what I want to see.
Well, what I do love about the current Mac Pro is, being an IT guy, we had the big old ones below the desk inside of a closet with cooling systems on it, and when you had to replace something or get the Mac Pro even out, it was horrible. Put all the cables out, put it on the side, push it out, open it, change your memory or whatever, or your video card. But with the Mac Pro, with all the Thunderbolt 2, is it still? Yeah, Thunderbolt 2 expansions. The bad thing is that you've got all the expansions on your desk, but the good thing is they're so easily replaceable. It's just for us, it's just click, click. All right, go again. And I think that Apple as well underestimated that, or perhaps really thought that everybody would get used to the idea of easily replaceable external hardware. But everybody wants PCI slots still, and PCI is a really old standard, and they just want to push the market forward. But
from what I understand, the PCI, the 16 speed, the 16 lane is faster than Thunderbolt 3, right?
Yeah.
Thunderbolt 3 is about 8 lanes, from what I understand.
Yeah, but I mean, more like, all those Windows laptops still got those VGA ports on it.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay, we don't need those.
It's something
that's ridiculous.
From the 80s. And I think Apple just looked at the PCI slot and thought, that's really old. Let's do it, redesign it or rethink it. Or
Yeah, but the graphics card, that's where they fit in, right? Whether it's an expansion one or whether it's on board, it's still a PCIe slot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they just made it a call that they thought that PCIe was going to leave, just like USB 1 and 2 and 3. Just get everything out. But the pros still want PCI.
Absolutely.
I'm biting my tongue.
No, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
What I don't get is if you are, and again, I don't want to get into the what defines professional versus not professional, but as a broad general statement, if you are a professional, you are collaborating with others, right? You are in an environment that is more than just a computer, right? If we're talking broadcast, if we're talking about post facilities, it's not just a machine and a monitor, right? There's other gear in the facility, and you need to work with that. And I don't want to use the term arrogance, but to call something pro and then create something that makes it difficult to work with other pieces of technology that is found in a pro environment doesn't seem to be keeping in the spirit of being a professional. If you are a professional freelancer and you're on your own, hey, makes complete sense. You got all your power in that one little thing. I get it, makes complete sense. But for the collaborative professionals who are working in an environment where there's different pieces of rack-mounted gear and infrastructures and cards for I/O and that kind of thing, that's a hallmark of a professional atmosphere. And to say we're not going to support that, or you need to change your entire other ecosystem to support this one facet, I never understood. And I think that's why there's been, quite frankly, some market loss in the uber high end, because we're not going to reinvent everything just to appease that one component.
Apple's answer is really buy a dongle most of the time.
Well, with Thunderbolt 3, that I don't have any problem with a lot of this stuff.
No, but when Thunderbolt was out, I don't say first released, but when when Thunderbolt 2 and multiple buses came out on the Canister Mac Pro, barely any of the devices you would find in a higher end professional environment supported that. It was all still PCIe based. You know why? Because it's not proprietary.
Right. Do they use, does the Windows side of things, are you seeing an adoption of 10 gig E on those machines? 10
gig is the new 1 gig. Okay. And anyone who is not running 10 gig, or at least running Cat 6A or, increased thicker gauge Ethernet cables, if no one is doing that, you're behind the times, because 1 gig is for your print servers, right? 10 gig is where you should be for networking at this point.
But then Jellyfish uses 10 gig.
Right. And if you look at a lot of Windows stations or Windows boxes, there's an option for a 10 gig. You can buy a card. A lot of the storage manufacturers qualify an Intel or any number of other 10 gig cards. So a lot of Windows users are definitely moving to 10 gig.
I was wondering about that. Tony, do you have a Jellyfish yet?
I do. I just actually upgraded the Jellyfish Mobile, which is sitting right here. It's off next to me. I upgraded it in October and got the Jellyfish Tower. So I'm loving it. But yeah, I completely agree. 10 gig is, you have to have, that's a minimum, just to be able to push around, small red files or 4K UHD ProRes. So right now I have the gentleman in the background of me. He's on a trash can Mac, and so he's got 10 gig there, and he's pulling a bunch of stills from a shoot we did earlier from Resolve. And to my right is another editor working on another campaign, and right now I'm actually doing a little coloring in Resolve while we're talking. But yeah, it's to have the Jellyfish is, it's a game changer for me. In the past, I had a company, and we etherneted everything, and then we were one of the first companies to do Thunderbolt bridging, which was interesting and cool, but scary and living on the edge of, collapsing. So this is much better. Everything is centralized, and it's been the best non-IT piece of hardware that I have, because I don't want to have to figure out how to, configure this port or change this or adapt that, or plug and play.
Exactly.
And boom, it's great.
So 10 gig E is being used for video transfer. I guess it's just data, but it was never really designed specifically for video, right?
No. You mean like the Ethernet? The idea of the
yeah, the 10
IP?
gig. I mean, when I think of video transfer, I'm thinking of Thunderbolt, but the 10 gig is being used by the Jellyfish and other solutions to actually transfer the video back and forth, right?
Yeah, you can get a sustained rate of throughput. I mean, that's one of the things that we didn't. The Thunderbolt bridging was a great idea, but it would never give a sustained throughput. So you could do IP over Thunderbolt, but there's always a break. So we can never get a sustained throughput.
And that's one of the issues, and I've trying to find a good way to phrase this. That's one of the discussions I've had with storage manufacturers for years, is that the network protocols that are used for 10 gig, and I don't want to get too deep in the tech weeds, but the SMB and the CIF share and the and whatnot, all of these network protocols are old and antiquated, and anything that engineers are doing to squeeze as much bandwidth as possible is relying on these old technologies, on these old mount points that have been ratified years ago, and were still around when Tron came out, right? The original. So moving to 10 gig is a lot like saying, well, you know what? There's gonna be deficits in the throughput. You're never gonna get as much as this promises, but we're gonna shove as much down that pipe as possible. And so that's why 10 gig is so great, because you may only be dealing with a ProRes file, but we're stuffing so much bandwidth into that 10 gig pipe that you're going to be able to transfer it. So to answer your question, was 10 gig ever designed, or was 1 gig ever designed for video transfer? No. It came out of the need to send commands to a printer, or to a network volume that you would be transferring Excel documents or something small like that. When we look at stuff like SANs, then we're looking into optimized connections that are meant for high throughput, consistent throughput, high quality of service that's meant for video. I think there are a lot of manufacturers that are taking the shortcomings of NAS and finding a way to package it and saying, hey, for you folks who don't need 100 editors all pulling 4K ProRes at the same time, this NAS will be fine. And this NAS will give you enough overhead that if you hit that eventual loss of quality and throughput because it's a NAS, you still have enough in the pipe to get you going. And I think a lot of NAS manufacturers have found that happy balance as to be able to do that.
It's kind of like the VHS versus beta, just record longer on VHS.
Well, what I like to do talk about is, let's say you break your arm, right? If you break your arm, do you want to go to a general doctor, or do you want to go to someone who specializes in broken arms, right? You want to go to something that is specialized for that. And I think in many cases, a general doctor is great. A NAS is fantastic. But there are some cases where you need a specialist, and that's where the SAN comes into play.
Yeah.
So Scott Simmons in the chat says, hey, Tony, who's that dude behind you? He looks suspicious.
He's watching you, Scott. He's in the crowd watching you right now. He's a creative director at our agency. He's pulling some still grabs. He says hi, by the way.
I presume he knows him.
Do you think that the Mac Mini have any appeal for the professional market, the new Mac Mini, since it has a 10 gig port? Do you think it appeals other than render farm?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because the eGPU that I tested was also tested on a 2018 Mac Mini, so I could actually see the performance differences between eGPU and non-eGPU and built-in, etc. And what I found is that the raw benchmarks for the i7s on the Mac Mini were fantastic. I mean, if you look at it, its single-core speed is faster than a Mac Pro, but obviously is slower than the multi-core count because there's less cores. And what I found is that without any kind of external acceleration, the Mac Mini is going to play back one stream of video. That was the base benchmark, is I could play back one stream of 4K iPhone footage or one stream of 4K ProRes, but the minute I did anything else, a blur, an effect, a resize, drop frames, and that was across all NLEs. It wasn't just Final Cut 10; it was Adobe and Resolve as well. A good engineering practice is to never top out your machine on day one, right? So getting an iMac and saying, here you go. Oops, you can't put an effect on there.
Yes, that's true.
Not
Yes.
really good. That being said, in a Hollywood environment where you have predators or producers or story producers who they're just doing string outs or they're just tagging footage,
More
okay.
than good.
But what I always see is, facilities buy the machines, and then 6 months later it becomes, we don't have enough machines. Oh, use one of the story producers' machines because we've run out of horsepower and it's not strong enough. So,
Michael, you hit on something that was another question I had about your video that's currently not online. In Final Cut, were you running on better performance or better quality when you were experiencing dropped frames?
that's a good question. I'll have to go back through my. I have like 4 hours of screen records while I was doing all this that I had to whittle down. I think it was best quality, but I'd have to look on that.
Yeah, the quality is definitely. I mean, I would be interested to see what Mac Mini would do on better performance, just because I normally, when I'm editing and doing effects, I'll keep it on better performance until I need to check something, for like pixel peep or whatever. But
I'm not suggesting
you
go out and get a Mac Mini and do benchmarks and then return it. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying it could be done.
I have one at home. I bought a Mac Mini that, and I actually found in the case of making DCPs, it was faster than my Mac Pro was, but that's because it's using the CPU. Okay. So I was actually getting faster performance for just that specific task. I have a MacBook Pro with the new Vega graphics that I'm using specifically. That's going to become my new work machine. So, it's not the Mac Mini is just the home computer, but I love it. It's a good machine.
I think that most people are pretty satisfied with the Mac Mini, right? The upgrade from the old Mac Mini.
Oh yeah, I mean it's light years ahead. Oh yeah.
So I think I'm hoping the Mac Pro does the exact same kind of leap from the old 2014 Pro. I hope it does the exact same kind of leap, the dramatic leap, not just an incremental leap.
It needs to.
Just keep Jonathan Ives away from it. There was no reason for him to be involved with the Mac Pro.
Okay, Richard.
That's the main thing.
Calm down.
Has anyone here used any like Mac Stadium or any of these Mac data centers? I've been wanting to look into those, but I haven't found any real world deployments of that. Has anyone used any Mac data centers?
Nope. No, I haven't.
Okay.
This is the first I've heard of a Mac data center.
Oh, so. Yeah, Google Mac Stadium. It's basically fleets of Mac Minis. That's all it is, because Apple doesn't allow you to virtualize anything. So it's just stacks of Mac Minis in a data center. Yeah.
You can virtualize on a Mac, right? So you need to first buy Macs and then virtualize, but it's not really VMware.
I've heard that folks have been able to spin up Mac VMs inside a VirtualBox. I haven't done it. I have a Hackintosh, but I've never been able to build a VM of an Apple OS.
Oh, I have all these. I have 3 different versions running on my system, but the hard part is, like in a real VM cluster, you need to have the shared storage and multiple machines, and that's the hard part for Mac's VMs. And basically, they're not really a good server as well. So go for Linux, I'd say, but.
Agreed.
So, Michael, when you put up re-put up your tests for your the one you had to take down, are you going to have some parts edited out? Is that what you're going to do?
Man, everyone
change the conclusion.
No, because my conclusions were Resolve is really good at this. Final Cut 10 is really good at using this. There was nothing bad about the review. The only downside was that, hey, Adobe and Avid don't use it as well, and the price tag's too high. That was the end all be all. I'm hoping I don't have to edit anything. I'm hoping that the issue is just timing, because the unit was so new, beta pre-release.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't plan on changing. If they want to send, if Blackmagic wants to send me a new unit to test with, I'm open to that. But as of right now, I can't see the review changing much unless they decide to drop the price exponentially.
Well, if you bought an eGPU, did you get Blackmagic, or did you get something with no card in it and get your own card?
Definitely. I'd probably go the Sonnet route and then pick my GPU poison. And then in another year or two, when there's a faster GPU that's 16 gigs, I'll throw that in there. Or I'd get the Sonnet that has multiple slots in the chassis, and then just swap out IO as I need it. Maybe I'd add on a PCIe SSD. Maybe I'd add on another 10 gig connection when I upgrade my home network to be all 10 gig. So, I would definitely go with something that was, probably 20% less expensive, maybe 30%, and then, bring your own GPU.
That's what I was probably end up doing too. So is there any benefit to adding an eGPU to an iMac Pro?
It depends on the application. Although you can tell the application at the OS level, here, use this GPU. Use this GPU if you want. And Adobe's running into this quite a bit, there's a big difference between utilizing the GPU and saying, I'm going to intelligently farm out this transcode or this portion to this GPU. How do I deal with transcodes across multiple GPUs? What if they're using different driver versions? What if one is an 8 gig, one's a 4 gig? What if it's external? Are we compensating for the latency going through the cable? So there's all these permutations of utilizing multiple GPUs with different codecs. So it's going to be up to the OS, it's going to be up to the application to intelligently understand that, which means heavy engineering on the app side.
Brad, what do you think about your new MacBook Pro?
It's new. I haven't done a whole lot with it. I've been trying to figure out the best docks, Thunderbolt 3 docks and stuff to get with it. And I found that the one that I currently have from OWC does not charge the MacBook Pro, which is incredibly frustrating.
Wow.
And I've looked
one
at
that does the same thing.
Yeah, and have a lot of other reviews. Like every review I look at for all these docks, there's all these complaints about things not working right. So that's a growing pain that I hope to solve. But it kind of goes back to what Michael was saying. Even though I'm not in the big work environment with tons of people, it's still frustrating the dongle game is still a little frustrating to work with all the stuff I've already invested in. And Richard, you were talking about an Apple display. Do we care? I'm interested to see what it is, because if Apple makes a really cool display, that might just be the thing that becomes my kind of new dock for my MacBook Pro next year. So if it ticks the boxes, I know the LG one that was out had some extra ports and things and allowed you to charge off of it. So if Apple can up that with the display, then I'd be interested in it.
Yeah, when I said that, what I meant was price and performance. I'm not sure if Apple's going to be competitive when there's other displays out there.
No, it'll be $400 or $500 more expensive than
a few
equivalent
$100
displays.
I wouldn't care about. But Apple was pushing. What version were they pushing when they had the 2016 MacBook Pro? They had something in there, the LG. So they were pushing them at that point. I just can't see Apple being competitive on the price and performance on displays. They might surprise us. We'll see.
I think it's the whole monitor thing, and sorry, Apple, but I don't think there's a lot of innovation on the monitor side. I think it's just repackaging, rebranding, and then marking up. And I think there's enough people who aren't worried about Apple's pricing that say, oh, I'll just buy the entire thing here. So it becomes ease of buying more than anything else. I don't have to do the research and find the right monitor. I can just buy it from Apple's website. And I think that's why LumaForge will see a bump, because, hey, I'm just going to just get everything here. So I'm not expecting any kind of, Jared Land red 3D, in your face technology from Apple on a monitor, other than just a rebranded LG or something with a bunch of, pass-through ports on there.
I will say there's a need, and I don't think the Apple Display will address it. I'd be pleasantly surprised if it will. But you buy Final Cut $2.99, right? And it has all these HDR tools, and the only way to monitor HDR is to buy the AJA box for a couple grand, and then buy another monitor for at least a few grand or whatever. And it would be amazing if there was an Apple Display that gave you HDR. I don't know if they'll be able to do that. I don't know if that'll be ready. But if I could be in Final Cut Pro and I could have an Apple Display that showed me the HDR image, that would be huge. So that would be something.
That would be. And now, can HDR can it go over Thunderbolt 3 effectively?
I don't know why it wouldn't.
Yeah, it can go over HDMI or DisplayPort. Yeah, that wouldn't be an issue. And if it can go over that, it can go over Thunderbolt 3.
The HDMI that they have on the Mac Mini doesn't do HDR, from what I understand.
Right. And that was another one of my little frustrations, because they just kept with it needs to be like 2.0B or something, and it's just 2.0.
Right.
And that would have been huge as well if I could plug a TV into a Mac Mini and have HDR, like plug an LG or whatever OLED. That would be amazing. But I don't know what the reasons why they can't do it. It's funny that the Apple TV can plug into an HDR TV and process that. I don't know if it's a licensing thing or what the rules are. I mean, you think with some of the open HDR standards, they could do something, but I don't know if anybody else has some insider information on that. I just don't know why it can't be done.
Has Apple hitched its wagon to any particular HDR standard?
On the Apple TV, it supports Dolby Vision and HDR10, and HLG. So I don't know.
I didn't know if that had any bearing on it, like maybe what the standard they had hitched their wagon to wasn't available from a licensing perspective, out of the HDMI port. I'm just speculating.
Right. Hey, Lee, what do you edit on back in Australia?
I'm on a not the current 15-inch MacBook Pro, but the previous 15-inch MacBook Pro, and then I've got that hooked up into 2 external monitors. And then
Does it have? Did you get the MacBook Pro that has the espresso port that gives you espresso?
No. Is that an option?
It was.
There's always get stuff that we don't get. It's so unfair.
I know. They add one of the new extension for Final Cut Pro is espresso. So
I thought it was a dongle that you hook up to your MacBook Pro.
Something.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we looked on Amazon, we could probably find one.
Yes. So what do we see in 2019 in like 10.5? Do we see anything? I mean, everybody wants collaboration. We want some people want the dupe detection.
Yeah, mail your cards to Apple Pro Apps at 1 Apple Parkway, Cupertino, California 95014. That's where you send your dupe detection cards. So yeah, let's get this fired back up. There was some excitement before the Creative Summit, and then we forgot about that. As far as I have no idea what they're going to do next. I'm pretty happy with the state of Final Cut Pro 10, but there's always things that I'm writing in that I think they could do to develop it further.
What about audio? Do you think they can tinker with audio in the next release? Because they seem to be focusing on specific parts of the app, like color. They wait years to change it, and then they do it really well, and then move to the next part. Do you think they might be working on audio for the next release?
I don't know.
I guess so.
I would have thought they would have finished that, because 2016 we saw a big leap in audio, but it was like halfway there.
Yeah.
Right,
and I would have thought that they would have addressed it again, but then I realized that there's a marketing side where they have to have something new and shiny, and to say we kept working more on audio is not new and shiny. So we'll see.
But when they do a big update, usually there's a lot of things they do, not just one thing.
And we did see multiple iterations of, like, for example, captions came out earlier this year.
Yes.
And they immediately said, by the time the Creative Summit happened, it's like, oh, and now we have SRT import export. And I'm like, thanks. That would have been really helpful before I was doing all my foreign language translations for Off the Tracks. But I'm glad it's there now.
So when's Off the Tracks 2 coming out?
It's called Back on Track: The DaVinci Resolve Story.
There you go.
Starring Tony Gallardo and Michael
I can help you
Thomas.
with that.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, Tony and I are producing the follow-up documentary.
And
Tony-
I'm going to have my hair cut the whole time, guys.
Yes.
So don't worry.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, only attractive models are going to be allowed in that one. So
Well, here's the thing, Tony. Just like when Clark Kent used to change his glasses and you couldn't tell he was Superman,
Yeah.
so we can tell the Tony whether it's Black Magic Tony or Final Cut Pro Tony, depending on his haircut.
yeah.
There you go. Yeah, I have my special comb that I keep with me, and I'll just comb
Change
it.
the part from one side to the other.
Yeah, there you go.
I almost didn't recognize you there for a second.
Hey, but Richard,
Yes.
everybody keeps saying about collaboration, hoping to come in 10.5, but I would be really surprised if Apple would build that within Final Cut 10. Because first of all, you need a server, and the thing that you see Apple doing with its server line is they just diminish it, and I think eventually it will stop building a server app.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think you need a server. If we look at the Adobe paradigm, that's all handled in the project, right? The only thing that they're using is a shared storage volume, and that shared storage volume doesn't have any. It doesn't control the shared projects. It just grants access. So I don't think it's a stretch to say Apple could come up with something that's also built into the app and communicating with each other on the network.
I suppose it's not so much from a technical point of view, but also looking at from a sort of like a market research point of view. Apple's been very, they haven't been sort of hiding the fact that, Final Cut Pro 10 was very focused on not so much the top end, but more on that mid, before Final Cut Pro 10, I used to run, those 3-day Final Cut Pro 10 workshops, the official certification workshops. Since Final Cut Pro 10, I've run fewer and fewer and fewer of those, but a lot of the training that I have been delivering has actually been to photographers who are moving into video. And that's a huge segment, and it's a much bigger segment than the type of editors that need collaboration and things like that. So not to say that collaboration isn't important and that a lot of people need it, but in terms of Final Cut Pro 10's market base, it's a much bigger part of the customer base that don't need collaboration. So it's needed, but I don't think it's at the top of the list.
I really think that Apple, because of workflow extensions, said if you want to have collaboration, let third-party developers develop that, and we focus on the content or content editing. But when you, for example, when you work on a library, you got to know who is working on a library and when. And most of the Final Cut 10 libraries are not on the same storage network. They interstate or in the country or intercontinental, whatever. So I do think you need a server for if you really want to do collaboration. You need access rights, you need users, and I don't see Apple developing that. I think their main focus is I think their idea is, okay, we're going to handle over collaboration to guys like Frame.io or other people doing stuff like that.
Perhaps a great opportunity for someone like Bebop.
Well, Jasper, your new nickname is Mr. Collaboration. That's any questions about collaboration? We're going to talk to you about it.
Well, I have my drum that I always beat is collaboration is something that is for the masses. So when we talk about like collaboration, like in a broadcast facility, that's different than the type of collaboration that Final Cut needs to do would be like students who are all working on the same school project, or clients and videographers and people who are trying to share media and share projects. And that's where, it's interesting. Michael's working for a cloud-based solution, and Apple does have iCloud, and iCloud does work with My Photos app. It does work to collaborate with iWork. So why not iMovie? Why not Final Cut in the future? I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm not saying next year. I'm not saying Maybe it's a decade
would you
out.
trust iCloud for your original media?
Has anyone else tried to collaborate with my work? It's yeah, not great.
Yeah, the notes and photos stuff works really well for me. The Pages I've had some issues. Particularly, I have issues when I'm not on a Wi-Fi network trying to access some documents. But I'm just saying there's different needs for collaboration, and I guess my ultimate point is if Apple's going to do it, then you have to make the argument for the common man, because I think everything Apple does is we're going to take this power and we're going to give it to the ordinary person. We're not, it's not the other way.
That's the same thing about the cinema displays, by the way. I always thought or heard somewhere that they released the first cinema displays to get good quality displays to the masses. But there's no longer a need. Same for the Apple Xserve Raids a long time ago. That was in a day very expensive, and Apple delivered them to the masses, and there was no need, so they ended that. So I think that might be the case for the cinema displays as well. But for the guys who went to the summit, I had a question about: did Apple say anything about how their mind works when they say we're going to build this feature now, or what's the priority list over there?
Oh yeah, we can talk about that. They cut one of their heads open, and we peered inside their brains. We can't talk about what they talked about, not in that session. If they
they did address mostly the idea of just send your feedback. We do look at it. As far as, I think there's just multiple forces, but I think a big feature is more likely to happen in Apple or with Final Cut Pro when it's aligned with some other part of Apple. Like, for example, 10.2 was released with the Mac Pro, or we got 10.3, which had touch bar functionality, and they were required to they were required to basically stop what they're doing, add touch bar functionality. So whenever they can align with the overall company, that's where we get the bigger features. And my understanding is that there are some things that are easy to throw in, and then there's other things that are kind of in the middle where it's maybe harder to they would have to spend more time on it, and unless it gets prioritized by Apple overall, then it may be a while before we see it. So it's just, I think it's a timing thing, and there's a lot of internal politics, but that's just based off of my general sense of conversations I've had. No particular one person or one thing, and definitely not anything said in that session really told me this is why we prioritize things over other things.
I don't want to be skeptical, but when they say we do listen, like you just search Twitter, and what I hear on Twitter, the main people saying we want better proxy workflows, we want better audio options, or like Marcelo said, that's or some features.
Okay, so I'll say this. I will say this: there are people on the design and engineering team who want certain things just as badly as you or I do, and there's just a lot of other politics that go into it that I don't comprehend. But they're definitely, they are very passionate. They are listening, and I've had one-on-one conversations with a lot of people that work on that team in the last year just by going to these events. And they do care. It's just, there's an overall, there's this giant company with their, they get Final Cut has to fit into that plan. And in a way, it's doesn't always just to get to add a feature. And honestly, I also appreciate that, sometimes Adobe just jumps into a feature, to be a little critical here. And sometimes they just implement a feature that breaks the app. And I don't want that. Like, you gave me what I wanted, but you broke the app at the same time. And Final Cut, not always, but usually is a little bit better about not breaking things when they add new stuff on top. And I'm sure there's a lot of internal discussions and of what people want, for the product. So
Yeah, Jasper, when they say they're listening, that doesn't mean they're going to implement everything. That just means that they're listening, right? No, they absolutely read every single email they get. They read them all, but they prioritize them. If one thing gets a lot of attention, they'll put it over in this category or whatever, just like any other company would do. But it has to coincide with a way that when they do things, they want it to be better than what exists now. They don't want just to, so.
Well, and talk about, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, talk about listening, batch exporting, SRT, everything that we saw at this last release was a response to some requests that we've seen. Go ahead,
timeline window, the timeline window, yeah. I mean, the time code window.
I was also going to add something that Apple does very well that I've had in conversations with them is you say, I want this, instead of them going, sure, we'll get right on it. They say why, and very often they don't necessarily give us what we wanted in the way that we wanted it, but they solve the problem. They don't give us the solution, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. The more detail you can give them when you send them a report, the better.
Yeah, that is very true. In the discussions I've had, like at the Creative Summit, it was, well, how are you working? What are you trying to accomplish? It's not just, I want you to add this. It's like, well, why do you want that? And that's a different approach to thinking. And sometimes I see people who are still breaking Final Cut Pro 10 to this day because they want to force it to work the way that an older system did. And they could get the same task done if they just embraced what I call the Final Cut Pro 10 way.
But the timecode window, I think it's a great example. I think since the release of Final Cut 10, people were screaming about, we need a timecode window. And it took them years to build it in. So
yes,
I
did.
I think also you'd be surprised how small the engineering teams are at Apple. Like I remember ages ago, the remote app for the Apple TV didn't get updated for a few years because the one person that worked on it was put on another project for 2 years. So it's there's only and I'm sure Jasper as an IT person, or I think any of us, whenever a client comes to us and goes, "Oh, could you just do this in the edit? It'll be really easy." That's my favorite thing in the world, when someone who doesn't know how I do my job tells me to do something because it'll be easy. It's I'll leave it at that.
When I worked as the National Archives post-production supervisor for 8.5 years, and one time I got a message from the archivist of the United States, his assistant, and said the archivist wants this video up on YouTube today. And I said, that's fine. If you can change the laws of physics, I'll get it up today. Otherwise, you're getting it tomorrow morning. So they got it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to remember what that Michael Cioni speech did at the Faster Together stage last year or the year before last.
Both of them are great.
We all want these new features, and I'm in my own little world, and you're in your own little world, and I think it's also important that, just like T. Payton was saying, we should all get together and say, what do we really want and need, what's important, and come with that one voice. So that way it's clear and distinct amongst the noise for everybody just yelling and screaming out there, I want this, I want this, I want that. I think we just got to remember that. That was a really good speech.
But Tony, there's 3.5 million seats. I don't think we're going to get one voice.
Well, we just have to have the microphone turned up to 11. That's all we need.
There you go. Well, we can do that.
If they keep detection, they could cut down some of those voices.
What's that?
Yeah. I said if they got dupe detection, they could cut down some of those voices.
Yeah. Do the dupe. Seriously, we need to do the dupe detection card thing. I don't even personally care that much about it, but I know there's so many people who need it that and I just think it'd be a fun campaign, and I think they'd love it, so we should do it.
So, Michael, you said you edit with Premiere. What would be your second choice of editors at this point?
Sony Vegas.
No, it would be 10. But that's I have to preface that with I haven't spent as much time in Resolve as I want to. I want to get better in Resolve. But if we're talking, I have something a project I need to get out or something I need to do, it's going to be Adobe and then 10. Yeah.
Is there any kind of a project you use 10 for right now instead of Adobe?
the work product that I need to generate isn't on a time frame that I need to. I need the extra speed benefits. The feature that I'm looking for is usability. I mean, and I just know Premiere longer than anything else. So no, I don't think I'm the right person to ask that.
Well, no, I was curious from your standpoint. So something else I noticed that you commented on recently is that one of your 5 things series takes about 40 hours of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People don't realize how long this takes. When I do a Final Cut Pro Radio, it's 8 to 10 hours of work every episode.
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize how long some of those things take. 40 hours is a lot of work.
It's a fair amount, and a lot of that is obviously I have to script it. I have to because it's all in teleprompter. I have to go through and cross my T's and dot my I's because I know there's going to be fine folks out there such as yourselves who are going to be like, "No, Michael, that's bullshit. Yeah, that tech is wrong." And I've had people call me out that was, you said inter and that should be intra. Okay,
right.
Got it. But when you're a one-man band, it means you're doing all the motion graphics, and you're, if you've seen the series, you know that I have movie cutaways. So I have to script that and then find the movie cutaways, and then it's getting the metadata into the podcast, and then it's updating on WordPress and updating on Roku and writing all the web page copy. So yeah, there's a fair amount of time that isn't just post, right? It isn't just creative editorial; it's everything else.
Absolutely.
So if I can read into where you're going, I don't think if I did it in 10 or I did it in another editor, it would change any of that because there's just too many things that have to be done from start to finish, and creative editorial is just one of them.
Right. No, I didn't mean specifically for your series. I meant just in general. No, I know how long those things take. I mean, it takes a lot longer from the inside than it does from looking from the outside.
and with that, I need to log off. I'm sorry to leave the party early, but everyone, it's been great working with you guys.
Absolutely. We'll do it again. No, you're not leaving early. It's been 101 minutes, so you're not definitely leaving early.
Have a great holiday, everyone. Richard, thanks for putting this together, and I'll see all of you in 19.
Cheers.
Okay.
See you, Michael.
See you later, Michael. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, gentlemen, I think we've solved all the problems involved in post-production, especially involving Final Cut Pro at this point. I think we've solved everything. Is there anything else, Tony? What's up with what are you looking for in Mac Pro for Resolve and Fusion?
GPU. Fusion requires so much GPU. So as much GPU as I can take. I have the iMac Pro, and it's perfect for Final Cut 10. For motion and just for processing, even processing red footage and that's perfect. But it's that GPU performance for Fusion. I'll take as much as I can. So for me, that's really what I want to see. Like Michael was saying, what do they mean by modular? What is their definition?
Right. But they should be listening. Yeah.
By adding more, sometimes adding more is not always the best. But what is that scale and how does that work? So that's what I'm excited about.
Absolutely.
Final Cut 10. We'll see.
Excellent. Gentlemen, I guess we're going to sign off. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I'd like to say we recorded some interviews for our podcast there at the Creative Summit. We weren't able to talk to you, Richard, because you left early. But we'll be releasing, we're still in the process of translating it for Brazilian listeners.
Okay.
For Portuguese-speaking listeners, but we'll be releasing the original version probably in the beginning of January. So I'll be glad to send the link to you from the interviews we did there.
Absolutely. We'll spread it wide on the internet.
Thank you.
What about you, Brad? Anything? Last minute? Christmas?
I'll talk to you all next year.
Exactly.
I'm going to go hibernate.
So happy holidays. Merry Christmas to everybody out there in Final Cut Pro land. I sure appreciate you stopping by to listen to us chat for a while. I doubt if we'll have any more of these in December unless something major breaks. We'll be back in January 2019. But if you listen to the next Final Cut Pro Radio, the one that's out now, and I interviewed Sam Messman from LumaForge for over 90 minutes. I edited it down to like just a little bit over an hour. It's a really good listen. A lot of good information there.
Yeah.
I just finished it, actually.
Did you learn anything?
Always.
Absolutely. I tried to get him to talk about NAB, but he said, no, we're not talking about that. We're not working about that now.
Yeah, one hump at a time.
Exactly. All right, everybody, we're going to sign off here. Merry Christmas to everybody. Season's greetings, happy holidays, however you celebrate this time of the year. And we will see you all on the next Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Holidays.